All right. So I had a more complicated term for my presentation, but I think I like the one that I finally ended up with, the mystery of the missing password. And you'll see in a few minutes what I mean by that. What I'm going to do is just go through some screenshots of Elgg and Drupal and show some interesting features that you may not have seen before on either of those applications. So the first thing is to look at a search result page from Elgg. And in this particular case, the search is actually for the word Elgg. And so for those of you who have used Elgg before, this is a pretty typical display. Profiles where interest equals Elgg, other uses with weblog posts and category Elgg, and so on. But something that's kind of interesting is at the bottom, it says users with external items in category Elgg. And that's a new feature that we've recently added to an experimental version of Elgg using a plugin. So you can focus a little bit more on that. And you can see that there are a number of people mentioned who have external items in category Elgg. So let's click on Dave. And then you can see, again, there's an item here, a post on July 31st, trying out the Elgg Drupal OpenID integration. But what's interesting is that if you click on that, you don't get to Elgg. You get to a Drupal page. And so what we've done is we've used a little bit of magic to make it possible to search for other application contents besides Elgg content within the Elgg context. So since one of Elgg's specialties is this concept of user portfolios, this becomes very interesting because you can actually look for tags and not only get Elgg content, but you can get Elgg content distributed across a lot of different applications. And the way that we've implemented this, and I'll get into this in a little bit while, in a few minutes, is actually a standard open source way of integrating search results. So it's possible actually to create a plugin for each client application and then have all the content appear within Elgg. One other interesting thing on this page is, let's suppose, for example, I wanted to add a comment to Dave's Drupal blog entry. There's an OpenID login box here, and this gets back to the title of my presentation, which is the mystery of the missing password. Unlike most user logins, like this one right here, there's no password. And so how does this actually work in a secure way? Well, another interesting thing about an OpenID login is that it's actually not just an identifier, it's actually a URL. And I'll show you in a little bit where this URL actually goes to. But this is a way of identifying a universal ID throughout OpenID. So it's possible to assign a unique ID to every individual person anywhere in the world. And then I entered my OpenID login without a password. And magically, I'm not only logged in, and in fact, you can imagine in this case, I've never actually been on this Drupal site before. And OpenID can actually do that. So you enter just your OpenID, and then you click on Submit. And not only are you logged into the site, but all of your information magically appears, and you're automatically registered. It knows who I am. It knows what my email address is, even though I've never actually been on this site before. Okay, one other thing that I wanted to go back to is the nature of the URL. And this is actually starting to draw away the veil and actually show the mystery of what this particular plugin, the OpenID plugin, is all about. If you actually type that URL into a browser, you end up with an Elgg profile page. And so your OpenID identity, in this case, because of the way that Elgg actually works, is the same as a profile page. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you the source of this page, which actually shows how OpenID actually works. And you can see here that there's actually something added in the meta tags, which says link rel equals OpenID server. And then there's another URL that points to an OpenID server. And this actually goes to a server that then can authenticate the user. Well, how does that actually work since you didn't add in a password? Well, the basic idea of OpenID is that if the server knows that you're logged into the server on an existing computer, then you don't need to log in again. That's what single sign-on is about. And yes, that's a perfectly secure way of organizing it. So you just need to log in once to the server. And in this case, the server is actually Elgg itself. And then after that, you can authenticate on a lot of different applications by simply entering in your OpenID. So the basic concept here is that you can integrate a lot of applications using single sign-on, and you can have Elgg being the OpenID server, so that instead of your users have to memorizing a lot of different passwords, they only have to log in once. And they only have to register once as well, because all of your information can be copied across from the Elgg server to any OpenID application. So this basically describes what I just said. And I just want to add a little bit more, which is that there's a standard profile exchange extension for OpenID, which supports exchanging a certain set of information. And that includes a nickname, an email address, real name, date of birth, postal code, country, language, and time zone. So the idea is that you can have a fixed set of information on the Elgg server and then transfer it to any application. You can also extend OpenID even further to be able to handle pretty well any other kinds of information. So you're not stuck to just the SREG extension. So the advantages of OpenID is that the password only needs to be entered once on the server, and that it's actually possible, and we're exploring this right now in the implementation we're doing for Elgg, to have a totally invisible registration, and in fact even invisible login, so that if you log into the Elgg server, then you're automatically logged into all of the client applications. So this is a way of completely breaking down the division between all of these different applications. So basically you just log in once, and whether you've got Moodle, whether you've got Drupal, whether you've got any other applications, as long as these all have OpenID client plugins, then it looks to the user as though it's all one application. And the advantage of using Elgg as an OpenID server is that you can actually use your profile page as your OpenID, and so all the client applications know your OpenID as well and can link directly to your profile page. So if anyone wants to find out about you, with one click they can go to your Elgg page and find out more about it. Okay, well, I want to wrap up by talking about the other feature which I mentioned at the beginning, which is actually being able to share search contents across applications. And this is the secret that's used there, and this is called an SSE feed, single sharing extension, which is actually a standard promoted by Microsoft starting in last year in 2005. And it looks a lot like an RSS feed, but it has a couple of additional features. One is that you can actually update information. So like, for example, here you can see a history. So the content has been updated. So the advantage of that is if you're actually syndicating content with an RSS feed, there's no way of really signaling that content has been updated. And there's also a feature within SSE to show that content has been deleted. So what you can do is you can have a client application syndicate all of this information, and then you can have a search engine collect all of that information, put it into one search engine, make it searchable. In this case, the search engine is actually an Elgg itself. And then if the content is updated or deleted, there's a way using an SSE feed to signal that, and so that information can be synchronized with the search engine. So the basic idea here is that you can not only have single sign-on so it looks to the user like you're only signing on to one application, you can also have the search content integrated, so all of the content in any of the applications appears when you search for it in Elgg. Okay, so I just want to look at, in wrapping up, I want to look at some specific features that we created for the OpenID plugin for Elgg. One of the things you can do is set up a default server, so instead of having to type that long URL in, you can actually enter a standard account name, and so that's automatically converted into an OpenID server name if you have a standard one for your suite of applications. There's also a synchronizing thing, so you can say if the user has changed their name or email address or any of their other contents, automatically synchronize that on the client applications so you can ensure that that information is kept up to date. And we also have something called OpenID lists, and the idea there is you can have a green list, a yellow list, and a red list of OpenID servers. And so the way that works is you can say that in a green list, you trust all the content from that server. So if someone uses an OpenID in a client application, you just take all the information over and you completely trust it. The yellow list says don't trust the email addresses because they may not have been confirmed or they may have simply been entered by the user and you don't really know if they're real email addresses. So in that case, then we use the Elgg machinery to actually confirm the address so that we know that it's a good one. And then there's also red lists, which you can use to actually block servers altogether. So there's a lot of fine control that you can use to actually trust or decide what kinds of identities that you're going to trust using OpenID. Okay, so in conclusion, if we're actually looking at different web applications and we're trying to figure out ways of actually combining their features together so that they appear to users like there's one application, there's really 6 different areas, I think, that you need to consider. The obvious one is look and feel. You don't want abrupt changes in design as you move from application to application. And there aren't really very good ways right now of integrating that, so you just have to do the hard slogging work of changing the CSS classes in each individual application to ensure that the look and feel is the same. For search, we now have some interesting tools, like, for example, a simple sharing extension, which enables us to take content from a whole bunch of sites and integrate it together so you can search for all the content in one place. And we have RSS to deal with the content syndication piece. And we also have OpenID, and there's probably about a dozen other similar standards which are being developed that are in competition right now to deal with things like single sign-on and profile exchange. But the ultimate goal of all of this is to be able to take a bunch of different applications and combine them together so that to the user they actually look like the same application. So instead of having to choose between Elgg or Moodle or Drupal, you actually can put them all together and benefit from the best features of each application. Okay. All right, well, I'll stop there.